next guest says there are a lot of myths and half-truths about love and sex. That children bring a couple closer is at the top of her myth list. So what do satisfying, intimate relationships really require? We'll find out. Let's take note with sociologist and relationship expert Pepper Schwartz. Dr. Schwartz is a professor of sociology at the University of Washington and the author or co-author of many books on love and sex. She is also past president of the Society for the Scientific Study of Sex. Her book, Everything You Know About Love and Sex is Wrong, was published by Putnam. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
Your book was written based on the proposition that a lot of popularly held assumptions about love and sex are just that, assumptions. What do you mean by that?
Well, that they're so well embedded in the culture that nobody even questions them anymore. And if they don't fit their reality, they question their own reality, not the assumption. So I want to sort of shake everybody by the collar and say, you know, don't just take it all in, you know, look at it, touch it, see if it's right for you, because it just might not be.
What prompted you to write it? Did you think people needed to know that, hey, you might be okay after all?
Well, actually, they always need that. They always need that. Everybody worries about that. But with my students, you know, I'm a university professor, and they just say these things like, well, that's unchallengeable. Like something like, well, of course, I believe in love at first sight. I mean, of course that's real. You know, I'll know when I've met the one. And I'll say, well, how will you know? And couldn't you give yourself wrong information? And might it not be, you know, an adrenaline rush? Well, what's an adrenaline rush? Well, let's talk about that, you know. And, well, I know so-and-so who met, you know, saw the guy across the street and knew it was the one. And I said, well, what about all the other people that she saw and they weren't the one, you know? Or the people who don't tell you that story because, in fact, they were wrong and they're not going to brag about it. So try to give them ways to think. It's part of critical skills thinking, but it's also getting rid of all that stuff that you should examine but don't.
You're coming at this, though, from a number of different angles. You're a researcher, a professor, a journalist, an advice columnist. What, from your experience, are among the most perplexing relationship issues?
Well, the two biggest ones are how to find it and how to maintain it. You know?
Find it
and they don't go away. They don't go away. I mean, finding it, you think that goes away, but of course the divorce rate means maybe it doesn't. But even if you find that person, keeping a relationship today when, you know, a lifetime marriage is not guaranteed is a real problem. So I oriented my book towards finding someone, the things you should take in, maintaining somebody, and the challenges, the things that get across the road that might tear you up, that I'd say, you know, wait, don't just knee-jerk react to this. Let's take a look at it. I mean, for example, one of the ones that might be very controversial to people is the idea that if there's an act of unfaithfulness, that's it, the trust is gone, I'm out of here, I have to be out of here. And I'd say, whoa, wait a minute, let's see what's at stake here. Let's see what the therapy outcomes are if people talk about it. Let's see what other kinds of things you might take on and work through. If your partner became an alcoholic, would you just walk out the door? Well, most people would probably work with them, right? And I'd say, well, you know, what's harder? Somebody who's alcoholic, can't work, spends all the money, is abusive verbally or whatever, or somebody who had, you know, a night where they were unconscious about the things they care about in life. I mean, come on, let's talk about this. So the idea being that, can you get over it? Yes, you can. Is it worth thinking about getting over? At least that.
And in fact, what you lay out are 25 relationship myths, and of course we won't get to all of them, but I'd like to cover some of them because
sure.
And they're interesting each in its own way. The first myth is your lover should be your best friend. Now, what's wrong with that? That sounds nice. It sounds we've heard it many times.
Well, the idea is that best friend. How deep should you and can you go? Why are so many women making themselves sick about it's not good enough? How good does it have to be? How intimate are relationships really capable of? And what makes a relationship a good relationship, even if you aren't best girlfriends? And I think this is more of a woman's thing than men, because men seem to get so much more easily pleased. I mean, she cooks, she's there, she has sex with him, you know, and he can, you know, moan and groan about work to her, everything's fine. But for her, she wants like this deeper cosmic connection. It is so hard to get. And what I say in part of that chapter is, Would you really want to live with your best friend? Is that kind of intimacy actually not tiring? That kind of intensity, that kind of stripped bare, maybe not what you want in the person you see every day. Maybe it is the special thing that you serve with that girlfriend. Does that complete exposure of the self really benefit you in all areas of relationship? Maybe some people actually could admit to themselves that they like a little distance, that they want a friendship, but they don't want that cosmic best friendship. They want something in between. Just to get it out of the idea is that if it isn't that, it isn't good.
And in fact, you point out that few people can be everything we're looking for.
Absolutely. So what you can do is torture yourself about something that's statistically rare. Is that smart? I don't think so.
But the interesting thing, you're talking about the fact that more women are looking for this cosmically intimate relationship, and yet more men say that they have married their best friend than women.
Well, because men's best friendship idea, is just above a golfing partner, and women have these deeper things. There was this one great little market research thing where it said, if you were stuck on a little island in the middle of the Pacific, who would you pick? And 90% of the guys said their wife, and about 70% of the women said Mel Gibson. So, maybe it's a little different. Now that's jocular, but nonetheless, I think there is a difference.
You explore this in your book, and I think it's worth talking about. You talk about the phenomenal, wildly popular book, The Bridges of Madison County,
right?
And the fact that that this speaks to us for some reason. Talk to us about that.
Well, I think essentially we're not monogamous animals. But we don't want to pay the price that comes when you're not monogamous. That is to say, we know that it destabilizes trust, family, all the things we've worked to build. But we have romantic notions that don't die, just because we made a commitment. I mean, we're not geese. Geese only pair once, Person dies, the goose stays alone. We're not like that. So what we wanted was a romance story that allowed us to have that emotional fling, that adventure, but it didn't destabilize the family. So as long as it was fated to end and there was this bittersweet quality about it, we could enjoy it and not say, this is terrible. I think it does say that we understand a little bit about the longings of the human heart.
And part of what I got is that lots of people are yearning for that experience. Maybe won't take that step, but could at least fantasize about it in that story.
Well, the incredible sales of romance novels don't come from no place. And I think it is a place for fantasy, and the best use of fantasy is to go some places in your head and experience them fully, like reading a book, without having to do it yourself. I think some people think, oh, you fantasize about it, then you do it. No, sometimes you fantasize it, and that will serve as doing it.
Now, my mother always said, don't fall in love with someone who doesn't like his mother.
Now, why would you say that?
Because you'll be treated the way he treats his mother, is I think what she was getting at.
Yeah.
But the myth that one that you point out, and that I've heard many, many times before, not from my mother though, was pick someone who has sown his or her wild oats and is now ready to settle down with you. What's wrong with that? Well,
at the end of the book, I do like 5 things that I think you should look at this book, and there are undercurrents throughout the book. And one of them, which isn't so much it's not the pleasantest thing I can say, but it is that the past predicts the future. Somebody who has never sown their wild oats doesn't know what wild oats are like, doesn't crave them ever, doesn't miss them ever. That's just not who they are. When somebody has done something for a long time, it's often hard to give up. And it's true that there are some people that just close the door and they never look back. But if I was going to make a money bet and I had to choose between someone who would live their life consistently one way versus, a high flyer and now they're ready to settle down, I wouldn't go towards the high flyer.
You wouldn't bet on the high flyer. Okay, another interesting myth. This is myth number 21, and that is we should pool our resources. The money should be in the same joint account. And you say that is a terrible idea. But the fact is that 80% of couples do have a joint checking account.
Well, I don't care if 99% do it, it doesn't make it the best way to go. It's the way we've done it in this culture. But there are a lot of cultures where women keep their own money and men keep their own money, and then they put together a joint pot for those things which are household. Whether it's paying the daily food bills or the mortgage or whatever, there's something where everything should go together. Or if a woman doesn't make money, then she should get her own share of it. What happens is if it's all in the same pot, and let's say he's more likely the big producer, it tends to become his to dole out. And you get women in this supplicant situation where they can't even buy a gift for somebody without asking and being accountable in a way that I think infantilizes women and ultimately gets them very resentful. And the man very resentful because, in fact, let's say she spends more than he feels good about. He has to watch it. I think adults should be responsible for a budget, and they're responsible for a discretionary budget, and if they stay within it, it's nobody's business. So you can have an independent adulthood. If you do it this way, I'll tell you one thing, and this is research I've done and it's been corroborated, you will fight about money about 100% less. And that's not a small benefit. You're still within budgets, you're still making agreements as a couple, as a family. It will not degrade the family, but you won't argue. You won't feel pressed against the wall as often people do.
Now here's the myth that you say has caused the most controversy, and that's myth 2022, always be 100% honest with your partner.
Well, that's like the Bible in America. You know, honesty is intimacy. I think honesty is often cruelty, and I think there are things people should never know, because once known, they will look at each other differently. And I think there are things in your mind that are best kept in your mind, truths that you could say that you should never say. A lot of people fight, they let it all hang out, that's never taken back. You know, I never liked the way you blank, right? Well, that doesn't go away once you apologize. There are things you're disappointed about in your partner that they cannot change. Why give them that information? Why undermine their self-esteem or their faith in you? My feeling is that keeping it to yourself is harder than honesty, because that's protecting someone as opposed to getting it off your chest. I'm not saying your marriage should be a sham, but I think this honesty is intimacy issue is really wrong and should definitely be re-examined.
What, in your opinion, are the essential ingredients of a healthy marriage?
Well, I think the first would be what psychologists call differentiation. That is, people are not fused in their personas. They know who they are individually. They can meet as strong, separate, mature people and like that differentiation. They don't need to be fused. They don't need to feel like they're one person. They're two people. And they can differ without feeling like their whole ego is challenged. Like somebody, they have to agree on everything for everything to be right and to be in love. And if you can get that one down, boy, you're really home free for almost anything, because you can respectfully disagree. You can go your own way some of the time and not think it threatens the entire relationship. I think there's, other lists, but I would at least start with that one in the small time we have available.
With just a couple of seconds remaining, is there one little nugget of information of the 25 myths that you would like people to remember?
Well, I do think that you have to take the past into account when you live in the future. I think it's important not to think you can change people's essential nature. I think that's extremely difficult, and I think you should have your act together before you have children, because it will challenge the relationship. It's not an intimacy builder.
Okay, thanks so much for being with us. We've been talking with Dr. Pepper Schwartz, who's the author of Everything You Know About Love and Sex is Wrong. For Take Note, I'm Patty Satalia.
A copy of the program you've just seen can be purchased through Penn State Media Sales at mediasales.psu.edu or by calling 800-770-2111.